motherfucker.
Bitches and gentlemen, it's showtime! Hurry, hurry, step right up! Introducing the star of our show! His name is... You wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world right now! So without further ado, I bring to you... You about to witness hip-hop in its most purest, most rawest, born flow, almost flawless, most hardest, most honest, known artist. Chip off the old block, but old Doc is happy with...
Right here in the assessment, it says that he was verbally threatening and he's used excessive physical aggression. The evaluator believes that he's at a very high risk of reoffending. He desires to engage in violence and he admits that he has little control over his sexual urges. The police have deemed Robbie a danger to the community. They plan to press charges against Robbie for aggravated indecent assault.
So you understand that he's already offended twice, or at least two victims, right?
Yes. I spoke to Robbie on the phone. Robbie told me it occurred twice.
I understand 1 in 20 of these get reported. And some research says that molesters with pedophilia will have an average of 70 acts of molestation.
Robbie had sexual urges towards his siblings as well as other children. He said that if he could offend them, he would force them to tape their mouth shut and keep them quiet. We put a safety plan in place. That included installing locks on the kids' bedroom doors. And he said that if we didn't get him help that day, that he was going to rape one of his siblings.
We had no other choice than to remove him from the house.
We left him at the hospital and he never came home. When you think about what you did, do you feel bad about that or do you just not care?
I feel bad about it, but in the same sense, I feel excited when I think of it.
Do you think that you would try and hurt one again? Honestly?
There's
Yeah. When you go out in public, you fantasize about raping strangers.
right.
You still have fantasies about raping strangers, but if you're not around strangers, it's a lot more controllable.
Gives me joy, excitement, peaceful.
So the thought of raping somebody makes you happy.
Right.
And how do you think that they would feel?
I don't think twice about how other people would feel. I just think of how I would feel.
Do you feel like if you got out of there, like you're gonna do that stuff again?
Sometimes I even worry about my own thoughts. I feel like I've gotten no better, and that if I do get out, there's more chance I have of doing it again. Yes.
Hey everyone, thank you for clicking on this video. This is my first video in a series attempting to debunk Dr. Phil, or at the very least, point out some obvious flaws and moral errors. 4 warnings. 1, I barely got my GED and I'm not a doctor. 2, I mean no harm or disrespect to any family members. 3, I'm in no way defending or sympathizing with a pedophile. And 4, mega trigger warning for talk of sexual abuse relating to children. So today we're talking about Robbie. You might recognize Robbie as a 15-year-old pedophile from an episode of the Dr. Phil show that aired on Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. One thing I will say is that Robbie is not like this guy.
For example, you say if this was someone that aggressed against a young boy and they have a young daughter, that would be much less cause for concern.
That's correct. I say under those conditions. I mean, when we're talking about somebody who's victim, we're say are in their teens, that's who they went after. And you find out that he's living next door to you and your kid's 4 years old, chances are your 4-year-old is not going to be at risk.
Okay, but yet you say in your own history
Yeah,
that you molested a 3-year-old little girl.
my daughter.
Yes.
Yes.
That you have had issues with young
Yeah,
boys,
yeah,
with teenage boys,
yes,
and then with late teen boys.
yes.
Or this guy.
I don't know if she developed false memories because of pressure from a counselor or what.
So let's take a look at the time that Robbie's family came on the Dr. Phil show because they had nowhere else to turn. The episode starts with Robbie's mother, Kristen, explaining the situation the best she could.
So you only care about what you would gain sexually?
Pretty much.
Do you still feel like if they let you out today that you would find a victim and that you would rape them?
It's not that, it's me trying to manipulate someone else.
So you think you would try to convince them to let you have sex with them?
Yeah.
And what happens if they aren't willing to? You told me that you would hurt them or make them shut up. Do you still feel like that?
Occasionally.
Or do you feel like you still have sexual thoughts and urges towards the same people you used to? Do you feel like if you got out of there, like you're gonna do that stuff again?
Sometimes I even worry about my own thoughts. I feel like I've gotten no better, and that if I do get out, there's more chance I have of doing it again. Yes.
At the time of the broadcast, Robbie had been put into a hospital due to his non-stop urges to molest children, including his own siblings. Before coming on the show, Robbie's parents desperately tried to exhaust any and all avenues to help or rehabilitate their son. Their efforts proved Dr. Phil's point when he stated this.
But you're going to plug into this now, right?
Yes.
When I say this is something that you can't just parent through, I mean, there really is a huge neurological component to this. And that means that if you look at the brains of a pedophile versus the brains of the general population, they are distinctly different. We don't know what's going on in his brain at this point. This attitude that, well, if you've been molested, you're going to be a molester, is just, that's easy to say, but there's just a whole hell of a lot more to it than that. And to give up on this child at 15 is just absurd. I just am not prepared to do that, even almost. I want to add someone to our conversation, and this is Dr. Daniel Sanderson, who is the clinical director for Star Guides Wilderness Therapy, which is a program that works exclusively with adolescents experiencing compulsive sexual behavior problems. So Dr. Sanderson, thank you so much for being here.
But other than offering clarity that this type of illness can't simply be parented away, he made a few, should I say, questionable assertions. One of them being the brain chemistry of the pedophile. Now, Dr. Phil was right in a lot of what he stated on how the brain of a person affected by such an illness will behave. But a couple things that were just skimmed past was the fact that Robbie's childhood trauma may be suppressed and affecting him the same, if not more, than his brain chemistry.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Phil.
What do you hear going on with Robbie that these parents need to understand?
You know, I'm hearing a lot of things, and obviously brings up a lot of questions for me as well. But I agree with you, Phil, when you're saying, let's don't give up on this kid yet. He's 15, okay? I suspect that we're probably talking about early developmental trauma here. There are likely neurological pathways that neurobiology has not yet actually been developed. Those pathways have not been developed, and they haven't had a chance to be developed because Robbie is stuck in this spot where he needs that power and control. That seems to be that amazing theme that keeps coming through all of this. That's the piece that needs to get disrupted, and at the same time, Robbie needs an opportunity in an environment that can keep him away from that part that's been, hyper stimulating for him. That will...
See, it seems that they hadn't ran any medical scans on Robbie or knew of his brain makeup at the time of the broadcast.
This is not something you can reason with him about. Just say, hey, come on, you think that these children want this, they don't. That you're talking to yourself. Have they done anything to brain map this child to find out what's going on with him neurologically? Okay.
And even more shocking, they all seemed to be confused, embarrassed, or ignorant to the possible sexual assault that happened to Robbie as a young boy.
When I came into their life, they had a man in their life, and him and his sisters would go visit, and it was very weird because he only wanted Robbie to visit. He wanted him like to be there alone, and this man's obsession was just too much. So I put an end to that relationship because I felt like there was something definitely off about it. But when I've asked Robbie about it, he's told me he doesn't remember him being offended. But then there was this one weird conversation we had where he said, "Sometimes I wonder if he did do something to me and I just can't remember it."
Which, left untreated and unspoken of, could directly relate to his behavior. And now I'm not saying that his past trauma, brain chemistry, or other genetic and mental factors play into this illness one more than the other, but I'm simply saying that neither Dr. Phil or Dr. Gandalf can seem to come to an agreement. And at some point, you kind of feel like you're in a used car salesman commercial.
Which I don't think is happening in his current treatment environment. So obviously, an out-of-door wilderness environment would be perfect for that kind of a trial, to see if we can't get him in that spot where we can disrupt this hypersexualized pattern and also give him an opportunity to begin developing a sense of himself that's not just based on his sexuality.
Like, is he trying to sell this program, or?
The level at which these kids reoffend is surprisingly low.
So, it looks like the number one answer is to go to Utah. Alright. So, are they going to run any medical scans or figure out his past trauma first, or? Oh no, right. Utah.
What kind of Dr. Phil bullshit is that?
So let's take all this in and look at the big picture. So after seeing this episode of Dr. Phil, I of course looked online everywhere that I could to see if there was any updates.
Robbie and his updates. A quick update already. What is in store for Robbie next?
Robbie was 15 at the time of this episode, and now he's an adult. So in reality, he's been institutionalized for almost 4 years now, and that's completely understandable and necessary because the other children in the home wouldn't be safe.
You have to think about this question. As a parent, if you had to make a choice to protect some of your children by isolating them from one of your other children, would you have the strength to do that?
He had to leave. So, you may be thinking to yourself, what the hell needs to be debunked and what are you talking about? You might not see any problems. Well, my concerns, I think, are quite justifiable when you actually peer into this rabbit hole. So the first thing, the parents of Robbie were given 4 days notice to be on the show.
They had asked us to find a babysitter, but we don't really have any family, so we said, you're giving us like 3 or 4 days notice, and I don't know that it's gonna really work out. And they're like, you know what, don't stress out over it, we'll fly everybody out. So they flew us all out.
And they went as fast as they could to California, but the problem is that Dr. Gandalf, the leader of the Boy Scouts therapy in Utah, well, he was upset that the Dr. Phil episode didn't air yet. And that seemed to be the main reason that Robbie was booted out of therapy.
Then I reached out and I was like, I just need to know when it's going to air because the program's kicking him out because their show hasn't aired.
Yes, you heard that right. The rehabilitation program that Robbie was sent to on the Dr. Phil show, it was short-lived due to the reason that the program didn't get their publicity yet. It's quite normal for all daytime TV shows to tape or film even a year in advance sometimes. The second thing that made me upset was the way that Dr. Phil talked to the parents. At times, he was very, very condescending, going as far as repeating the same mantras about parenting that wouldn't help the situation.
You have that conversation. And how many children are in the home?
We have 5 in the home.
Okay, so If you brought him home, you would be bringing him home to 5 children. That is distinctly non-optional. This is not something that you're going to be able to parent him out of.
Dr. Phil also talked down to them about their other children, and it was almost an indirect threat when he introduced SWAT and CPS into the conversation.
You will lose all 6 children because Child Protective Services will descend on you like SWAT team and take them all out of the home.
Very messed up. Third thing here is Robbie's early childhood developmental trauma. He obviously has some hidden and suppressed problems that he had never spoken about at this time, and for them to give the family 4 days notice and send Robbie to Utah without first running tests and having a deep and thorough conversation with his current therapist, it all seemed rushed without knowing his full story and looking into his full mental and psychological makeup.
Okay, so what was given to him is a psychological assessment with able assessment of sexual interest and trauma. And then he was also given a scenario where he was supposed to draw at the end, like his ideal things. So during the assessment, he acknowledged and talked about some of the emotional abuse endured throughout his childhood by his biological mom. However, since this assessment, he says that he doesn't really remember a lot about his biological mom. So it seems that he's blocked a lot of that out at this point. He was also given the ABLE assessment for sexual interest and a trauma event drawing to do after that. Some of the things that were concerning in his ABLE assessment that I wouldn't have known had we not given him the assessment was that he was attracted to 22 different image categories, and he preferred males 5 and under. And then his second group, he preferred adult males. So it's really confusing because he prefers either really small children or older men, and not really anybody his own age. When given in what he testified to, he switched them and said that he preferred adult men, and he actually listed males 5 and under as his third preferred category. So he was given like hundreds of scenarios, and so this is under the S&M category of like different violent scenarios that would turn him on, and there was over 27 different violent scenarios that aroused Robbie. So Robbie was not exposed to S&M. When he went into treatment, he was there for 15 months, and during that time he was given an assessment online that he took on a computer, and on that assessment it listed hundreds of different violent scenarios. And so one of them, I'll give you a few examples off of the list that aren't over the top. I'm not going to say anything that's just completely foul. But some of the things that are concerning that were listed is getting even and forcing his partner to engage, having a 9-year-old male who is extremely terrified, fondling, and having a 4-year-old boy cry and scream. And but he also was turned on by consensual fondling as well. But he does on the list say some of the scenarios that he also enjoyed was like raping somebody of the age of 16, 11, and 3, and also 7. So, and then a 9-year-old came up again. So like, it definitely shows concern. And at this time he was 14 to 15 when he was given this assessment. He had just turned 15. So when we talk about like younger children, obviously at 15, that's an appropriate type of thinking. And so I didn't really know what questions to ask to get a gauge on exactly his preferred age or grouping of people. And that's something that maybe if I would have known about the different types of assessments, that maybe I could have got connected with his therapist and had them give him one of these assessments. And I'll be posting updates as I have them.
And at this point, I'm sure that Robbie's been in and out of more than 5 programs. Some of them he's completed, and he's an adult. When he was discharged from Utah, he went into a super strict maximum lockdown program. His mother said that he put in a lot of work and succeeded in that program, and now he's in a less restricted place where he can even cook for himself and he has a full-time job.
So, I wanted to share with you guys what I know to an extent. Okay, so, going into March, Robbie will be going into a different program. So he's actually completed the program that he was in, which was very restrictive, and it was like maximum lockdown. Like, it was kind of a program that was like very, you had to take it very serious to complete, and he put in the work. He did. So he's been there for a year. Yeah, he put in the work. He finally took his treatment serious, and he has made such good progress, and he owes that to you guys, because he said that what really motivated him was, after we went on the show, reading all of the loving and supporting comments about people who wanted him to succeed. And he said that that really motivated him and made him want to be better and made him want to do better. He put in the work. He worked his butt off over the last year. The first 2 treatments he didn't take very serious, so that you don't really have thoughts and feelings towards children anymore, but it's mostly towards adult men, so that's been cool.
Oh, I do like to work in the kitchen.
Yes, you really like to cook. And people ask me a lot, what do you do in the program you're at? And I was telling them how you got a job. So you could tell them about your job if you want.
Okay. So, as you guys may have known, yes, I do have a job.
I really think the second treatment center, though, broke him to a place where he realized that he didn't want to be in treatment for the rest of his life.
Now, I do sweep and mop. I get paid for that. I also clean bathrooms. I do help the maintenance guy. Along with, I also do help put groceries away. All of that is what I do get paid for.
I don't have a tissue in this room.
I do want to mention about my book, but I should.
Yeah, I don't think you should talk about your book, because we're not going to publish that anytime soon. The support and the positive comments and the people who have kind of believed in you this whole time. I remember you saying it helped you to make progress, and you feel like you finally struggled enough and you stopped resisting. And so I was telling people how I feel like you're actually making progress now.
Yes, to whoever's listening right now, whoever's following, you guys have helped me through this process well. I mean, I don't know where I'd be right now if it wasn't for you guys along with my parents helping me through this.
For him to be doing so good now, I can't believe it, given his past. You know, how is he doing better? It's almost unbelievable. And again, I don't want to offend any family members, but I greatly attribute the way that Robbie is to somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer. I say this because Jeffrey Dahmer was incredibly honest and forthcoming about his problems. Robbie doesn't seem to lie, and he has followed the directions of all of his doctors and family, etc. And someone like this who is brutally honest has way more of a chance to succeed in the real world, in my opinion. So when you look at it, Dr. Phil has had dozens of pedophiles on his show, and there's only a couple of them that have displayed honesty. Honesty is the one and only thing that might help even the sickest and most depraved of people. So going through Kristen's many updates on her YouTube channel, you can see that his family deeply care about him. He even thanks her and his community of supporters for being able to make it this far. I personally hope that he never offends again and releases his book that he's been working on. Again, I want to say I do not condone any pedophilia or anything like that. I just see a big difference between Robbie and different perpetrators out there who are not honest. And I think that for him being in programs for 4 years now and finally becoming an adult, I'm kind of scared, honestly. This is make or break. This is either a miracle on his part for doing better, or something's going to go downhill soon. So I really hope that he's getting the help he needs, and I wish that the Dr. Phil show had approached this situation a lot different. And with that being said, I'll see you guys later.